Did you know Sandahl Bergman did nearly all of her own stunts in Conan the Barbarian because no one else moved like her? With her commanding physicality, ethereal beauty, and background in dance, she seemed born to play mythical warriors. But after a red-hot run through cult classics and genre flicks of the 80s, Bergman all but disappeared from the screen. So what the hell happened to Sandahl Bergman? Let's fade to black. Sandahl Bergman was born on November 14, 1951 in Kansas City, Missouri. She grew up far from the Hollywood spotlight, but it wasn't long before the world of movement and expression called to her. She began studying dance at a young age, and by the time she was in her early 20s, she had relocated to New York City to chase her dreams of performing on stage. It was there, in the pressure cooker of Broadway, that her tall, statuesque frame and graceful athleticism started turning heads. She quickly landed ensemble and featured dancer roles in hit musicals like Promises, Promises and Gigi, but it was Bob Fosse who became her biggest champion. Fosse was one of the few directors who could spot physical charisma on par with acting chops, and in 1979 he cast Bergman as one of the dancers in All That Jazz. The film was semi-autobiographical, intense and deeply stylized, and Bergman stood out, not just for her beauty, but for the way she moved. Sharp, elegant, precise, yet totally unrestrained. This wasn't a woman playing to the camera, she commanded it. And that's what caught the eye of another filmmaker gearing up for a bold fantasy epic. When John Milius was casting Conan the Barbarian in 1982, he needed someone who could match Arnold Schwarzenegger's physical presence but bring vulnerability, mystique and sheer warrior energy to the screen. He found that in Sandahl Bergman. She was cast as Valeria, a thief, a fighter, a romantic lead, and the emotional heart of the film.
Do you know what horrors lie beyond that wall?
No.
Then you go first.
Valeria wasn't window dressing. She bled, she loved, she sacrificed, and she fought with brutal grace. Most impressively, Bergman did nearly all her own sword fighting and stunt work. She even turned down a stunt double, claiming no one could replicate her unique movement style. The result was one of the most memorable performances in any fantasy film of the era, and audiences noticed. She won the 1983 Golden Globe for New Star of the Year, and suddenly, Sandahl Bergman wasn't just a dancer or a physical performer, she was a leading lady.
I want to thank all the people that were involved with Conan, especially John Milius, who when everybody said no, he said yes. I'm truly a product of sweat and change, and I'm thrilled about this. Thank you.
In 1983, riding high off the success of Conan the Barbarian, Sandahl Bergman released her own workout video titled Sandahl Bergman's Body and Soul. Part of the booming fitness tape trend of the era, the video combined her background in dance with strength-based aerobic routines. It wasn't just about fitness, it reflected her unique blend of grace and physical power. Set to synth-heavy music and full of carefully choreographed moves, the tape showcased Bergman's control and presence, reminding viewers that she wasn't just an actress, she was a trained performer with complete command over her body. It may not reach the popularity of Jane Fonda's tapes, but for her fans, it's a fascinating time capsule and another example of how Bergman carved her own path through 1980s pop culture. But fame in Hollywood, especially for actresses in genre films, can be a double-edged sword. In 1985, she starred in Red Sonja, this time playing the villain Queen Gedren opposite Brigitte Nielsen. You'd think it would cement her status as a fantasy icon, but the film flopped. Hard. Critics panned it, and even Schwarzenegger later joked it was the worst film he'd ever made. But Bergman? Again, she gave it everything. She leaned into the villain role with scenery-chewing intensity, fully aware of the camp but never phoning it in. If anything, she elevated the film. Still, in the eyes of producers and casting agents, the damage was done. She was now seen as a fantasy niche performer, imposing, statuesque, and hard to fit into mainstream roles. That famous too striking label haunted her. She didn't look like your average supporting actress, and Hollywood wasn't sure what to do with that. From the mid-80s into the 90s, Sandahl began racking up a string of cult appearances and straight-to-video roles. There was Hell Comes to Frogtown in 1988, a bizarre post-apocalyptic action flick co-starring Roddy Piper. Bergman played Spangle, no-nonsense government scientist tasked with escorting the last fertile man through a mutant wasteland. Yes, exactly as strange as it sounds, but she plays it straight, which only makes the film more bizarrely effective. She also popped up in genre flicks like She, Stewardess School, and Programmed to Kill, which tried to position her as an action heroine in the same vein as Linda Hamilton or Sigourney Weaver. But the budgets were smaller, the scripts weren't strong, and though she remained dedicated to each performance, the industry had already shifted focus. The mainstream had no idea what to do with a 6-foot-tall, badass ex-dancer warrior queen, and so Sandahl started drifting away. By the early 90s, Bergman's appearances became sporadic. She had a brief stint in TV with shows like Swamp Thing and Moonlighting, and even appeared in the background of Airplane 2, but by 1993 she had essentially vanished from Hollywood. So what happened? Well, unlike some stars who burnt out or spiral, Sandahl made a conscious choice. She said in interviews that she'd never craved fame. The grind of auditioning, the superficial nature of the business, it really didn't appeal to her long term. And she was never chasing tabloid notoriety. In fact, Bergman was famously private. She had a son, born in the late 80s, and by all accounts chose to step back from acting to raise him out of the spotlight. She also continued dancing and choreographing quietly, returning to the world that had shaped her in the first place. Movement, not celebrity, was her true language. Despite having a relatively short window in the public eye, Sandahl Bergman has become something of a legend among fans of 80s fantasy and cult cinema. She was a key part of the sword and sorcery boom, not just as eye candy or a sidekick, but as a true action lead. Valeria in Conan the Barbarian remains one of the most fully realised female characters in the genre. Strong, passionate, tragic, and unflinching. In many ways, she paved the way for future warrior women on screen, showing that beauty and physical power weren't mutually exclusive. She didn't have to be saved, she was the saviour. Even now, her performances are regularly rediscovered by new generations of fans, thanks to Blu-ray reissues and retrospectives. At conventions, her presence is still celebrated, and she remains a beloved figure to those who grew up with her films. Very little is known publicly about Sandahl Bergman's personal life, and that's exactly how she wanted it. She was never drawn to the fame machine or the Hollywood party circuit. After retiring from acting, she reportedly lived in Southern California, raising a son and staying out of the limelight. There are scattered interviews and convention appearances in the 2000s, but no major return to acting. No scandals, no tell-all books, just a quiet exit. And maybe that's the most Sandahl Bergman thing of all, to burn bright for a moment, leave an indelible mark, and then walk away on her own terms. Sandahl Bergman was never just an actress, she was a force of nature, a dancer turned warrior who carved out her own niche in a male-dominated genre and made it unforgettable. She may not have had the decades-long career of some of her contemporaries, but when she was on screen, she was magnetic. In a world that often values fame over integrity, Sandahl Bergman chose authenticity, and in doing so, she became a cult legend. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking around, and if you're into these kinds of deep dives, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next one.